Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Meridian, watching the massive alien space station grow larger on the main screen. The Zephyrian Empire had finally agreed to meet with humans after months of careful communication. Through automated messages? This was the moment that would decide if humanity would have new friends among the stars, or if they would remain alone in their small corner of the galaxy. Jake was 32 years old and had spent most of his adult life in space. He had brown hair that was always a bit messy and green eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. His crew trusted him because he always tried to do the right thing, even when it was difficult. Today, that trust would be tested more than ever before. The Zephyrian space station was enormous, easily 10 times bigger than any human structure. It looked like a giant crystal that had been carved by master artists, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Ships moved around it in perfect patterns, never getting too close to each other. Everything about it spoke of a civilization that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez joined Jake at the front of the bridge. She was the ship's xenobiologist, which meant she studied alien life forms. Lisa had short black hair and wore glasses that made her look very serious, but Jake knew she was excited about this mission. She had been studying the limited information they had about Zephyrians for months. "Captain, I'm reading some interesting energy signatures from their station," Lisa said, looking at her tablet. "Their technology is definitely more advanced than ours, but there's something else. The life signs I'm detecting suggest they're not that different from us biologically." Jake nodded. "That's good to hear. The last thing we need is to accidentally offend them, because we don't understand their basic needs." The communication system crackled to life, and a voice spoke in perfect English, though with a strange accent that made some words sound like music. "Earth vessel Meridian, you are cleared to dock at Bay 7. Please follow the guide lights and maintain your current speed." Jake looked at his pilot. "You heard them, Danny. Take us in nice and slow." Danny Chen was one of the best pilots in the Earth fleet, and he guided the Meridian through the docking process like he had done it 1,000 times before. The ship settled into the docking bay with barely a vibration, and Jake could see through the windows that the bay was filled with a breathable atmosphere. "Atmospheric readings are good, Captain," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster from her position at the science station. "Temperature is comfortable, and the air mixture is actually very similar to what we breathe on Earth." Jake straightened his uniform and checked his appearance one more time. First impressions were important, and he wanted to represent humanity well. "Dr. Rodriguez, you're with me. Danny, keep the ship ready in case we need to leave quickly. Amy, monitor all communications and record everything." The airlock cycled open, and Jake stepped onto the alien station for the first time. The floor was made of some kind of smooth stone that felt warm under his feet, and the walls curved upward into a high ceiling. Everything was designed on a scale that made Jake feel small, but not uncomfortable. A group of beings approached them, walking upright like humans, but clearly different. They were tall, maybe 7 feet on average, with skin that looked like it had scales, but felt smooth when Jake later shook hands with them. Their faces were longer than human faces, with large eyes that seemed to see everything at once. They wore robes that flowed around them as they moved, and Jake noticed that the colors seemed to shift depending on how the light hit them. The being in the center of the group stepped forward and spoke. "Welcome to Station Velanara. I am Princess Lyra Veltar, daughter of Emperor Krex, and your assigned cultural liaison for this historic meeting." Jake tried not to show his surprise. He had expected to meet with diplomats or scientists, not royalty. Princess Lyra was smaller than the other Zephyrians, maybe only 6 feet tall, and there was something about her that seemed more curious than formal. Her scales were a beautiful blue-green color that reminded Jake of the ocean on Earth, and her eyes were a bright silver that seemed to shine with intelligence. "Your Highness," Jake said, giving a slight bow because he wasn't sure what else to do. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison, representing Earth and humanity. This is Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, our xenobiologist. We're honored to meet you." Princess Lyra tilted her head slightly, and Jake noticed that her scales seemed to change color a little, becoming more green than blue. "Please call me Lyra. We are not so formal here when we are learning about each other. I have been studying your language and culture for many months, and I find humans very interesting." As they walked through the station, Jake was amazed by what he saw. Gardens grew in carefully tended spaces, with plants that seemed to glow with their own light. Water flowed in streams that defied gravity, moving up walls and across ceilings, in patterns that were both beautiful and impossible by human understanding. The Zephyrians they passed stopped to look at the humans with curious expressions, but none seemed afraid or hostile. "Your station is incredible," Dr. Rodriguez said, taking readings with her equipment. "The way you've integrated living systems with your technology is something we've never seen before." Lyra seemed pleased by the compliment. "My people have always believed that technology should work with nature, not against it. We have learned much over the centuries about living in harmony with the forces of life." They arrived at a large chamber that was obviously designed for meetings. The walls were covered with images that moved like videos, showing scenes of Zephyrian history and culture. A table in the center of the room was surrounded by chairs that seemed to be grown rather than built, shaped from some kind of living wood that adjusted to fit whoever sat in it. "This is where we will conduct our formal discussions," Lyra explained. "But first, I would like to learn more about you personally. Your culture seems to value individual relationships as much as formal agreements." Jake sat down in one of the chairs and was surprised by how comfortable it was. "That's true. We believe that understanding each other as people is the first step to understanding each other as civilizations." Lyra's scales shifted color again, becoming more silver than blue. "I find this concept fascinating. In our society, we often focus on duty and protocol before personal connections. But studying human culture has made me wonder if we might be missing something important." Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her readings. "Princess, if you don't mind me asking, what made you interested in studying human culture specifically?" Lyra was quiet for a moment, and Jake noticed that her scales became a deeper blue color. "When we first received your messages, our scientists analyzed the emotional content of your communications. We found that humans seem to experience a much wider range of emotions than we do, and that these emotions seem to make you stronger rather than weaker. This was very different from what we expected." Jake leaned forward, interested. "What did you expect?" "We expected a species that was driven by logic and efficiency, like most of the other civilizations we have encountered. Instead, we found beings who make decisions based on hope, curiosity, and care for others. Our scientists said this should make you weak, but your achievements suggest otherwise." The conversation continued for several hours, covering everything from human history to Zephyrian art. Jake found himself genuinely enjoying talking with Lyra, who seemed to have an endless curiosity about human customs and ways of thinking. She asked questions about human families, about why humans formed emotional bonds with each other, and about how these bonds affected their decisions. As the day went on, Jake noticed that Lyra's scales continued to change color, becoming brighter and more varied. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been quietly taking readings, finally spoke up. "Princess, I hope this isn't too personal, but I'm detecting some unusual energy patterns from you. Are you feeling well?" Lyra looked startled, and her scales quickly shifted to a neutral gray color. "I am fine, thank you." "Perhaps we should continue our discussions tomorrow. I have much to think about after our conversation today." As they prepared to return to their ship, Jake felt that the day had gone better than he had hoped. The Zephyrians seemed genuinely interested in peaceful relations with humanity, and Princess Lyra had been an excellent guide to their culture. He had no idea that his presence had already begun to trigger changes in her that would soon surprise them both. The next morning, Jake woke up early and found himself looking forward to seeing Princess Lyra again. He had slept well on the Meridian, but his dreams had been filled with images of the beautiful alien station and its fascinating inhabitants. Dr. Rodriguez was already awake when he found her in the ship's small laboratory, studying the readings she had taken the day before. Find anything interesting? Jake asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the machine that never seemed to. Make it quite right in space. Lisa looked up from her tablet with a puzzled expression. Actually, yes. The energy readings I got from Princess Leia yesterday were unlike anything I've seen before. Her biology seems to be in some kind of flux, like her body is adapting to something new. Jake raised an eyebrow. Should we be concerned? Maybe we're affecting her in some way we don't understand. I don't think it's harmful, Lisa said, adjusting her glasses. If anything, the readings suggest she's becoming more active biologically. But I'd like to monitor her more closely if she's willing. They returned to the station that morning to find Princess Lyra waiting for them in the same meeting chamber they had used the day before. She seemed more relaxed today, and Jake noticed that her scales had a warm golden color that made her look almost like she was glowing softly. Good morning, Jake and Lisa, she said, and Jake was surprised by how natural it sounded when she used their first names. I hope you slept well on your ship. We did, thank you, Jake replied. Though I have to admit, after seeing your station, our ship feels pretty basic. Lyra tilted her head in that curious way Jake was beginning to recognize. But your ship brought you across the vast emptiness between stars to meet us. That makes it quite remarkable, doesn't it? Jake smiled. I never thought of it that way. They spent the morning working on the formal trade agreements between their two species. The Zephyrians were interested in human agricultural techniques, especially the way humans could grow food in difficult conditions. In return, they offered to share some of their advanced medical technology and their methods for creating sustainable energy, but Jake found himself more interested in the conversations that happened between the formal discussions. Princess Lyra asked endless questions about human society, especially about families and relationships. She seemed fascinated by the idea that humans formed emotional bonds with each other that lasted for their entire lives. In our society, she explained during one of their breaks, we are taught from childhood to control our emotions and focus on our duties. Reproduction is handled through careful genetic matching and scientific procedures. The idea of choosing a mate based on emotional connection is considered primitive. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her notes. But your species must have had emotional bonds at some point in your evolution? All intelligent species do. Lyra's scales shifted to a deeper blue color. Yes, our historians tell us that in ancient times our people did form what you might call emotional partnerships. But our scientists decided centuries ago that emotions made us weak and unpredictable. They developed ways to suppress these feelings and focus on logic and efficiency. Jake leaned back in his chair. But don't you miss having those connections? On Earth, our relationships with family and friends are what make life meaningful. I am beginning to think that perhaps our scientists were wrong, Lyra said quietly. Since meeting you, I have experienced feelings that I was taught to suppress. But instead of making me weak, they seem to make me more alive. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another Zephyrian, this one wearing more elaborate robes than the others Jake had seen. Princess Lyra stood quickly, and her scales became a neutral gray color. Commander Thex, she said formally. I was not expecting you. The newcomer looked at Jake and Lisa with obvious disapproval. Princess, your father is concerned about the amount of time you are spending with these aliens. Some of the council members believe you are becoming too influenced by their primitive ways. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. Princess Lyra, however, seemed to grow taller, and her scales shifted to a bright silver color that Jake had never seen before. Commander, these humans are our guests, and they are helping us understand new possibilities for our people. I will spend as much time with them as is necessary to complete our mission. Commander Thex looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he simply bowed stiffly. As you wish, Princess. But remember that you have duties to your people that go beyond satisfying your curiosity. After he left, Princess Lyra seemed to deflate slightly. I apologize for that. Some of our people are suspicious of change, even. When it might be beneficial, we understand, Jake said. Change is hard for everyone, but sometimes it's necessary for growth. That afternoon, Princess Lyra suggested they visit some of the ancient sites on the station. She led them through corridors that seemed older than the rest of the structure, with walls covered in carvings that told stories of Zephyrian history. The air here felt different, somehow more alive than in the modern sections of the station. These areas are rarely visited now, Lyra explained. Most of our people prefer the efficient modern spaces, but I have always found peace here among the stories of our ancestors. They stopped in front of a large carving that showed Zephyrians in what looked like a celebration. The figures were intertwined in complex patterns, and their faces showed expressions of joy and connection that Jake had not seen on any of the modern Zephyrians he had met. This depicts the festival of bonding, Lyra said, running her hand over the carved stone. It was a ceremony where our people would find their life partners through emotional connection rather than genetic matching. The ceremony would last for days, and those who formed bonds would be united for life. Dr. Rodriguez studied the carving with interest. What happened to these ceremonies? They were outlawed about 500 years ago, Lyra replied. The scientists said they were inefficient and led to genetic weaknesses. But looking at these images, I wonder if we lost something important when we gave up these traditions. Jake studied the princess's face as she looked at the carving. Her scales had taken on a soft, warm color that reminded him of sunset, and there was something in her expression that looked almost like longing. "Do you think your people would ever consider bringing back some of these old traditions?" he asked. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know. But meeting you has made me think that perhaps our ancestors understood something about life that we have forgotten." They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the ancient sections of the station. Princess Lyra showed them art and technology that seemed to blend together in ways that the modern Zephyrians had abandoned. Everything here seemed to be created with both function and beauty in mind, and Jake could see why Lyra found peace in these spaces. As they walked, Jake found himself sharing stories about his own life on Earth. He told her about growing up in a small town, about his parents who had been married for 30 years and still held hands when they walked together. He talked about his sister who had 3 children and how much joy they brought to the whole family. Princess Lyra listened to every word with intense attention, asking questions about human customs and relationships. She seemed particularly interested in the idea of marriage and the commitment that humans made to each other. On Earth, Jake explained, when 2 people decide to spend their lives together, they make promises to each other in front of their families and friends. They promise to support each other through good times and bad times, to be honest with each other, and to put their relationship above their individual desires. "And this makes them stronger?" Lyra asked. "Usually, yes. When 2 people truly care about each other, they can accomplish more together than either could alone. They support each other's dreams and help each other through difficulties." Lyra's scales shifted to a color Jake had never seen before, a deep purple that seemed to shimmer with inner light. "I think I am beginning to understand why human civilization has achieved so much despite your relatively short history. Your emotional bonds give you strength that our logic-based society cannot match." As the day ended and they prepared to return to their respective quarters, Jake realized that he had enjoyed spending time with Princess Lyra more than he had expected. She was intelligent, curious, and seemed to genuinely care about understanding human culture. He found himself looking forward to their next meeting. Princess Lyra seemed reluctant to end their time together. "Jake," she said, and he noticed that her scales had returned to the warm golden color they had been that morning. "Thank you for sharing your stories with me. I have learned more about what it means to be alive today than I have in all my years of formal education." "Thank you for showing us your world," Jake replied. "I'm looking forward to learning more about your people and your culture." As he walked back to the Meridian, Jake had no idea that his words and presence were triggering changes in Princess Lyra that would soon surprise them both. The ancient biological processes that her people had suppressed for centuries were beginning to awaken, and the emotional connections she was forming with the human captain were unlike anything she had ever experienced before. 3 weeks had passed since the first meeting between humans and Zephyrians, and Jake found himself spending more time on the alien station than on his own ship. Every day brought new discoveries and deeper conversations with Princess Lyra, who seemed to grow more comfortable with him as time went on. Her scales had begun showing colors that even she didn't seem to understand, shifting through shades of gold and silver that made her look almost luminescent. Dr. Rodriguez had been carefully monitoring these changes, and what she was discovering made her increasingly concerned. The energy readings from Princess Lyra were unlike anything in the medical databases, and they were growing stronger each day. During their morning briefing on the Meridian, she finally decided to share her worries with Jake. "Captain, I need to talk to you about Princess Lyra," Lisa said, her voice serious as she looked at her tablet filled with readings and charts. "The biological changes I've been detecting are accelerating, and I'm starting to see patterns that remind me of reproductive cycles in other species." Jake set down his coffee cup and gave her his full attention. "What kind of reproductive cycles?" "Well, that's the strange part. The energy signatures suggest that her body is preparing for reproduction, but there's no indication of any standard mating behaviors or hormonal changes that we would normally associate with such a process. It's like her biology is responding to something entirely different." Before Jake could respond, the communication system buzzed with an incoming message from the station. Princess Lyra's voice came through the speakers, but she sounded different than usual, almost breathless. "Jake, could you please come to the station quickly? I need to speak with you privately. Something is happening to me, and I don't understand what it is." Jake and Lisa exchanged worried glances. "We'll be right there," Jake responded, already moving toward the airlock. When they arrived at the station, Princess Lyra was waiting for them in a small chamber that Jake had never seen before. It was clearly a private space, decorated with personal items and comfortable seating that seemed designed for relaxation rather than formal meetings. What immediately caught Jake's attention was that Lyra's scales were shifting rapidly through different colors, creating patterns that were both beautiful and clearly distressing to her. "Princess, what's wrong?" Jake asked, moving closer to her with genuine concern in his voice. Lyra looked up at him, and Jake could see something in her silver eyes that looked almost like fear. "I have been experiencing changes in my body and mind for the past week. At first, I thought it was simply the result of learning so much about human culture, but now I fear it is something much more serious." Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward with her medical scanner. "May I take some readings? I might be able to help figure out what's happening." Lyra nodded gratefully, and Lisa began her examination. The readings that appeared on the scanner made her eyes widen in surprise. "Princess, these energy patterns are consistent with what we call bonding behaviors in many species. Your body seems to be responding to some kind of emotional or psychological trigger." "What does that mean?" Jake asked, though something in the back of his mind was beginning to form an uncomfortable suspicion. Princess Lyra stood up suddenly, her scales shifting to a deep red color that neither Jake nor Lisa had seen before. "I must tell you something about my people that we do not usually share with outsiders. Our ancestors reproduced through a process called emotional bonding, where intense feelings of connection and compatibility would trigger biological changes that allowed for reproduction between partners." Lisa nodded slowly. "That would explain the ancient ceremonies you showed us. But I thought your people had eliminated those processes centuries ago." "We thought so too," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our scientists used genetic modification and psychological conditioning to suppress these ancient responses. But it seems that they did not eliminate them completely, only buried them deep within our biology." Jake felt his stomach drop as he began to understand what she was trying to tell him. "Lyra, are you saying that our friendship has somehow triggered these ancient responses?" Princess Lyra's scales shifted to a pale blue color, and she looked down at her hands. "I believe so. The more time I spend with you, the stronger these feelings become. I have researched the ancient texts, and the symptoms I am experiencing match exactly what our ancestors described as the beginning of the bonding process. Dr. Rodriguez was studying her readings with increasing amazement. This is incredible. Your body is actually reverting to ancient biological patterns that were suppressed for centuries. But Princess, if this is truly an ancient bonding process, what does that mean for your reproductive cycle? Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her scales continuing to shift through different colors. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft that Jake had to strain to hear her. According to the ancient texts, once the bonding process begins, it will continue until either reproduction occurs or the bond is broken. But the texts also say that breaking a bond once it has formed can be fatal to the bonded individual. Jake felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Fatal? Lyra, we need to find a way to stop this process before it goes any further. I have been trying, she said, and Jake could hear the desperation in her voice. But every time I attempt to distance myself from you, the symptoms become worse. My body seems to believe that you are my chosen partner, and it will not accept any other possibility. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her scanner with an expression of scientific fascination mixed with concern. Princess, I'm detecting chemical changes in your system that are similar to what we see in human pregnancy hormones? Is it possible that the bonding process has already progressed beyond the initial stages? Princess Lyra's scales suddenly shifted to a bright white color, and she looked at Jake with an expression of complete shock. Dr. Rodriguez, are you suggesting that I might already be pregnant? I'm suggesting that your body thinks you are. Lisa replied carefully. The energy readings are consistent with early-stage pregnancy in several species I've studied, but without more detailed scans, I can't be certain. Jake ran his hands through his hair, trying to process what he was hearing. This is impossible. We're completely different species. How could human emotions trigger pregnancy in a Zephyrian? Princess Lyra moved to a window that looked out into space, her scales continuing to shift through different colors. The ancient texts speak of a time when our people could bond with compatible species from other worlds. They believe that true compatibility was not just physical, but emotional and spiritual as well. Perhaps your human emotions are more similar to our ancient ones than we realized. Dr. Rodriguez was taking continuous readings, her scientific mind working to understand what was happening. Captain, I need to run more detailed scans to confirm what we're dealing with. But if Princess Lyra is right about the ancient bonding process, we may be witnessing something that hasn't happened in our species for centuries. Jake moved to stand beside Princess Lyra at the window. Lyra, I need you to know that I care about you as a friend, but I never intended for anything like this to happen. If there's a way to reverse this process without harming you, we need to find it. She turned to look at him, her scales shifting to a soft golden color. Jake, I know that you did not intend for this to happen. But I must ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, of course. Do you feel any connection to me beyond simple friendship? When we spend time together, do you experience emotions that are different from what you feel with other people? Jake was quiet for a moment, considering her question carefully. The truth was that he did feel something special when he was with Princess Lyra, something that went beyond diplomatic courtesy or professional interest. She was intelligent, curious, and kind in ways that reminded him of the best qualities in humans. But he had assumed that these feelings were simply the result of their unique situation. I do feel a connection with you, he said finally. You're unlike anyone I've ever met, and I find myself looking forward to our conversations more than I probably should. But I thought those feelings were just the result of being in such an unusual situation. Princess Lyra's scales shifted to a warm silver color, and she smiled for the first time since they had arrived. Perhaps they are more than that. Perhaps your human emotions and my ancient Zephyrian responses have found something in common that neither of our species expected. Dr. Rodriguez cleared her throat, bringing their attention back to the immediate problem. This is all very touching, but we still need to figure out what to do about the biological changes that are happening. Princess, if you are indeed pregnant through this ancient bonding process, there are going to be serious implications for both of our species. Princess Lyra nodded, her expression becoming serious again. You're right, Dr. Rodriguez, I must. Find the courage to tell you both the complete truth about what is happening to me. She took a deep breath, her scales shifting to a deep purple color that seemed to pulse with inner light. I have been avoiding the most important question because I was afraid of what the answer might mean. But I can no longer deny what my body is telling me. Jake felt his heart racing as he waited for her to continue. The silence in the small chamber stretched for what felt like hours after Princess Lyra's confession. Jake stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she had just told him. Dr. Rodriguez was frantically taking readings with her scanner, her scientific training taking over even as her face showed complete amazement at what she was discovering. "Princess," Lisa finally said, her voice barely steady, "I'm confirming pregnancy-like hormone levels in your system. This shouldn't be possible between our species, but the readings don't lie." Jake sat down heavily in one of the chairs, running his hands through his hair. "Lyra, I don't know what to say. I never imagined that something like this could happen." Princess Lyra moved to sit across from him, her scales shifting to a soft blue color that Jake was beginning to recognize as her way of showing vulnerability. "Jake, I need you to understand that I am not blaming you for this situation. Neither of us knew that such a thing was possible, but now that it has happened, we must decide what to do." Before Jake could respond, the chamber door opened suddenly, and Commander Thex entered with several other Zephyrian officials. Their expressions were stern, and Jake immediately knew that somehow they had learned about the situation. "Princess Lyra," Commander Thex said, his voice cold and formal, "you will come with us immediately. Your father demands to see you, and these humans are no longer welcome on our station." Princess Lyra stood up quickly, her scales shifting to a bright silver color that Jake had learned meant she was angry. "Commander, these are our guests, and they have done nothing wrong. I will speak with my father, but I will not allow you to treat them with disrespect." "Your Highness," one of the other officials said, "we have been monitoring your biological functions as a matter of security. The readings we have detected are extremely disturbing. It appears that you have been contaminated by these aliens in some way that threatens your health and possibly your life." Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her medical scanner still in her hand. "That's not accurate. Princess Lyra is experiencing natural biological processes that are part of her species' ancient reproductive cycle. She's not contaminated or sick." Commander Thex looked at Lisa with obvious distrust. And how would a human scientist know anything about Zephyrian biology? "You have been here for only a few weeks." "Because I've been studying the readings carefully," Lisa replied, her voice growing more confident. "Princess Lyra's body is reverting to genetic patterns that were suppressed centuries ago. This is actually a remarkable scientific discovery that could benefit both our species." "Enough," Commander Thex said sharply. "Princess, you will come with us now. These humans will return to their ship and prepare to leave our space immediately." Jake stood up, his jaw set with determination. "Commander, with respect, Princess Lyra just told us something that changes everything. If what she believes is true, then we have a responsibility to make sure she receives proper care and support." "What responsibility could you possibly have to our princess?" Commander Thex demanded. Princess Lyra looked at Jake, then at the Zephyrian officials, and Jake could see her making a decision that would change everything. Her scales shifted to a brilliant gold color, and when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that Jake had never heard from her before. "Commander Thex, I am carrying a child that is half human and half Zephyrian. Jake Morrison is the father, and according to our ancient laws, that makes him my bonded partner. You will treat him with the respect due to a member of the royal family." The silence that followed was deafening. Commander Thex's face went through several expressions before settling on what looked like complete shock. The other officials began talking rapidly among themselves in the Zephyrian language, their voices rising in what sounded like panic. "This is impossible," Commander Thex finally said. "The ancient bonding processes were eliminated from our genetics. Centuries ago, our scientists made sure of that." Dr. Rodriguez held up her scanner. "Your scientists suppressed those processes, but they didn't eliminate them completely." Princess Lyra's exposure to human emotions and genetic material has reactivated dormant genes that have been sleeping in her DNA for generations. One of the officials, an elderly Zephyrian with scales that were almost white, stepped forward. If what you say is true, then this is either the greatest disaster or the greatest miracle in our recent history. The ancient texts speak of the power of the bonded pairs, but also of the chaos they could bring to ordered society. Jake looked at Princess Lyra, seeing the fear in her silver eyes despite her brave words. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we go to see my father," Lyra said. "And we hope that he is wise enough to see the possibilities in this situation rather than just the problems." The journey to the Imperial Chambers was tense, with Commander Thex and his officials surrounding Jake and Lisa as if they were prisoners. Princess Lyra walked beside Jake, her scales continuing to shift through different colors and patterns that seemed to reflect her emotional state. "Lyra," Jake said quietly, "are you sure about this? Once we tell your father, there's no going back." "I'm sure," she replied. "Whatever happens, I will not hide from the truth of what we have created together." Emperor Krex was waiting for them in a vast chamber that seemed designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. He was enormous even by Zephyrian standards, with scales that were deep black with silver patterns that seemed to move in the light. When he spoke, his voice filled the entire room. "Daughter, I have been told that you have allowed these aliens to contaminate you with some kind of disease. Explain yourself." Princess Lyra stood straight and proud, her scales shifting to the same silver and gold pattern that Jake had seen when she was most confident. "Father, I am not diseased. I am pregnant with a child that represents the future of both our species." The Emperor's scales darkened even further. "Explain this madness." Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her scientific training overcoming her intimidation. "Your Majesty, what has happened to your daughter is not madness. It's evolution. The ancient bonding processes that your people suppressed are actually a form of advanced genetic adaptation that allows your species to form beneficial partnerships with compatible alien races. And what benefit could there possibly be in mixing our pure bloodline with these primitive humans?" Emperor Krex demanded. Jake felt his temper rising at being called primitive, but Princess Lyra spoke before he could respond. "Father, I have spent weeks studying human culture and biology. They are not primitive. They are different, and that difference could make us stronger." "How?" the Emperor asked, his voice dangerous. Dr. Rodriguez consulted her scanner and took a deep breath. "Your Majesty, the genetic combination that Princess Lyra is carrying represents the best of both species. Human adaptability and emotional intelligence combined with Zephyrian longevity and advanced cognitive abilities. This child could have capabilities that neither species possesses alone." "And what are the political implications?" Commander Thex interrupted. "If the princess has bonded with this alien, what does that mean for her position in our society? What does it mean for our relations with other species who might see this as a sign of weakness?" Emperor Krex was quiet for a long moment, studying Jake with an intensity that made him feel like he was being examined under a microscope. "Human, what do you have to say about this situation? Do you accept responsibility for what has happened to my daughter?" Jake met the Emperor's gaze without flinching. "Your Majesty, I accept full responsibility for my part in this situation. I care deeply about Princess Lyra, and if she truly is carrying my child, then I will do everything in my power to support her and protect both her and the baby. And what can a primitive human offer my daughter that her own people cannot?" Jake thought carefully before answering. "I can offer her emotional support and partnership. I can offer her the kind of relationship that your people used to value before you decided that emotions were weaknesses. And I can help raise a child who might be the bridge between our two civilizations." Princess Lyra moved to stand beside Jake, taking his hand in hers. Her scales immediately shifted to a warm golden color, and Jake felt a strange tingling sensation where their skin touched. "Father," she said, "I know this situation is unprecedented and frightening, but I believe It represents an opportunity for our people to grow beyond the limitations we have placed on ourselves. This child could be the beginning of a new era of cooperation and understanding between species. Emperor Krex looked at their joined hands, and Jake saw something in his expression that might have been wonder. The ancient texts spoke of signs that would herald a new age for our people. Perhaps this is one of those signs. Dr. Rodriguez was studying her readings with growing excitement. Your Majesty, I'm detecting energy patterns between Princess Lyra and Captain Morrison that I've never seen before. When they're in physical contact, both of their biological systems seem to become more stable and efficient. This bonding process isn't just about reproduction. It's about creating a partnership that makes both individuals stronger. The Emperor was quiet for several minutes, his scales shifting through different patterns as he considered what he had heard. Finally, he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of a decision that would change both civilizations. 6 months had passed since Emperor Krex's decision to accept the unprecedented union between his daughter and the human captain. The Zephyrian station had become a place of constant activity as scientists from both species worked together to understand the implications of the pregnancy that was changing everything they thought they knew about biology and reproduction. Princess Lyra had grown more beautiful as the pregnancy progressed, her scales taking on colors that had never been recorded in Zephyrian history. Patterns of gold and silver moved across her skin in ways that seemed to respond to her emotions and to Jake's presence. Dr. Rodriguez had documented dozens of new biological phenomena, each one more remarkable than the last. Jake had moved permanently to quarters on the station, accepting Emperor Krex's offer to serve as Earth's first permanent ambassador to the Zephyrian Empire. The arrangement had not been without its challenges, as both governments struggled to understand the political implications of the bonding between their representatives. The baby is growing faster than we expected, Dr. Rodriguez told Jake as they reviewed the latest scans in the medical facility that had been specially constructed for this unique pregnancy. The genetic combination is proving to be incredibly stable, and the biological development is unlike anything I've seen in either species. Jake studied the images on the screen, still amazed that he was looking at his own child. The baby appeared to be developing characteristics from both parents with what looked like the beginning of scales along with recognizably human features. Is everything progressing normally? More than normally, Lisa replied with excitement. This child is developing cognitive abilities that surpass both human and Zephyrian standards. The brain scans show neural pathways that neither species possesses individually. I think we're looking at a new form of intelligence that combines the best of both worlds. Princess Lyra entered the medical facility, moving with the grace that had always characterized her but now enhanced by the glow that seemed to surround her during the pregnancy. Her scales were their usual warm golden color, but Jake noticed new patterns that appeared whenever she was happy or excited. How is our little miracle today? She asked, moving to Jake's side and taking his hand. The moment their skin touched, both of their biological readings spiked in ways that Dr. Rodriguez was still trying to understand. Growing strong and apparently very intelligent, Jake replied, squeezing her hand gently. Lisa thinks the baby might have abilities that neither of our species has seen before. Lyra's scales shifted to a brilliant silver color. The ancient texts spoke of children born from true bonding who would possess gifts beyond those of their parents. Perhaps our ancestors knew more about the possibilities of interspecies partnerships than we realized. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Thex, who had gradually become more supportive of the Union as its benefits became clear to the Empire. Princess Captain Morrison, Emperor Krex requests your presence in the council chamber. There are representatives from several other alien civilizations who wish to discuss the implications of your bonding. Jake and Lyra exchanged glances. Over the past months, word of their unprecedented pregnancy had spread throughout the galaxy, attracting attention from species that had never shown interest in either humans or Zephyrians before. Some were curious, some were concerned, and some saw opportunities for their own civilizations. The council chamber was filled with beings from at least 8 different species when they arrived. Jake recognized some of them from diplomatic databases, but others were completely unknown to him. Emperor Krex sat at the head of the gathering, his scales showing the dark patterns that indicated he was in full diplomatic mode. "Daughter, Captain Morrison," the Emperor said as they entered, "our guests have come to learn about the changes that your bonding has brought to our people. Perhaps you would be willing to share your experiences with them." A tall, crystalline being that Jake had never seen before spoke first. "We are the Centaur Collective, and we have observed the reports of this human-Zephyrian bonding with great interest. Our species has been searching for ways to enhance our own genetic diversity, and we believe your experience might offer insights that could benefit us all." Princess Lyra stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over despite the unusual circumstances. "Honored representatives, what Jake and I have experienced together has taught us that the barriers between species are often less significant than the connections we can form through understanding and emotional compatibility." A reptilian being with feathers instead of scales spoke next. "The Keth Empire has monitored your pregnancy with concern. We worry that encouraging interspecies reproduction could lead to the dilution of pure genetic lines and the weakening of individual civilizations." Jake felt his jaw tighten at the suggestion, but Princess Lyra's scales remained calm silver as she responded. "Respected representative, our experience suggests the opposite. The combination of human and Zephyrian genetics has created possibilities that neither species possessed alone. Rather than weakening us, it has made us stronger." Dr. Rodriguez, who had been invited to provide scientific testimony, stood up with her tablet full of data. "I have 6 months of continuous biological monitoring that supports Princess Lyra's statement. The genetic combination has produced enhanced cognitive abilities, improved physical resilience, and emotional intelligence that exceeds the baseline for both species." A small, furry being with large eyes spoke in a voice that sounded like music. "The Harmony Coalition has always believed that diversity creates strength. We would be honored to learn from your experience and perhaps explore similar partnerships with compatible species." The discussions continued for hours, with various species expressing everything from enthusiasm to skepticism about the implications of human-Zephyrian bonding. Throughout it all, Jake was impressed by Princess Lyra's ability to address each concern with wisdom and patience, her scales reflecting her confidence and determination. As the formal session ended, Emperor Krex approached Jake and Lyra privately. "My daughter, I must admit that when this situation first arose, I feared it would bring chaos to our carefully ordered society. Instead, it has opened possibilities that I never imagined." "What do you mean, Father?" Lyra asked. 3 more Zephyrian females have reported experiencing the same biological awakening that you did when exposed to compatible alien partners. The ancient bonding processes are returning to our people, and with them, the emotional connections that we had lost. Our society is beginning to change in ways that may restore what our ancestors valued most." Jake felt a surge of pride and wonder. "Your Majesty, are you saying that our bonding has encouraged others to explore these connections?" "I am saying that you have given my people permission to feel again," Emperor Krex replied. "And in doing so, you may have saved us from becoming so efficient that we forgot how to live." Dr. Rodriguez hurried over to them, her face flushed with excitement. "Princess, Captain, I need to tell you something incredible. The baby's neural development has reached a point where I'm detecting conscious thought patterns. I think your child is aware and responding to your voices." Princess Lyra placed her hand on her enlarged abdomen, her scales shifting to the warm golden color that Jake had come to associate with her deepest happiness. "Can you hear us, little one? Your mother and father are here, and we love you so much." Jake placed his hand over Lyra's and immediately felt a strange sensation, as if something was responding to their touch. "I think the baby can sense when we're together. The connection between all 3 of us seems to be growing stronger. According to my readings," Dr. Rodriguez said, studying her scanner, "the baby is not just aware of your presence. It's actually enhancing the biological connection between you and Princess Lyra. The bonding process is continuing to evolve even after the initial pairing. 3 weeks later, Princess Lyra went into labor during what should have been a routine morning meeting with trade representatives. The process was unlike anything recorded in either human or Zephyrian medical literature, proceeding smoothly and peacefully as if guided by ancient instincts that both species had forgotten. Jake was present for the birth, holding Lyra's hand. As their child entered the world in a private medical chamber surrounded by the best doctors from both civilizations. When the baby finally emerged, the room fell silent in wonder. The child was beautiful beyond description, with skin that seemed to shift between human smoothness and delicate scales that reflected light in patterns of gold and silver. The baby's eyes were large and bright, showing an alertness that was remarkable for a newborn. When Jake first held his daughter, she looked directly at him with an expression of recognition that made his heart overflow with love. "She's perfect," he whispered, looking down at the tiny face that somehow managed to resemble both him and Lyra. Princess Lyra, exhausted but radiant, reached out to touch their daughter's face. She will be the first of a new generation, one that will know no barriers between species or worlds. Dr. Rodriguez was taking readings as fast as her equipment would allow. The baby's biological signatures are off the charts. Enhanced intelligence, accelerated development, and genetic stability that exceeds anything